All right, today we're diving into a battle that was so much more than just a defeat. It was a genuine turning point. We're talking about a story where one man's ambition, his quest for glory, led to the absolute slaughter of his army, and believe it or not, helped set the stage for the fall of the entire Roman Republic. Just try to put yourself in this position, okay? You are the wealthiest man in Rome, period. And you're leading 7 legions, we're talking tens of thousands of the best soldiers on the planet, out into this vast, empty desert. What are you after? Glory, of course. Riches, for sure. You want a legacy that puts you on the same level as your famous rivals. But instead, you march your entire army headfirst into one of history's great disasters. It was this perfect storm of arrogance, meeting tactical genius, and the fallout, well, it would echo for centuries.
So, who was this man at the very center of it all? Let's talk about Marcus Licinius Crassus.
Crassus was an absolute titan in Rome. He was a member of the First Triumvirate, sharing power with none other than Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great. And, while he was famously the richest man in the Republic, he had a big problem. In a culture that valued military glory above literally everything else, his partners were rock stars. Crassus's own military fame was, well, it was ancient history. So you gotta ask, what on earth possessed him to launch this totally unsanctioned war against the Parthian Empire? Well, it was a pretty potent cocktail of reasons. You've got envy, right? He was watching Caesar racking up these incredible triumphs in Gaul, Pompey with his victories in the East, and he was just seething. I mean, his last big win was against Spartacus nearly 2 decades earlier. Then, of course, there's greed, the promise of unbelievable wealth. He also wanted to give his son's political career a serious boost. And maybe the most dangerous part? Pure hubris. He just assumed Parthia would be an easy target, a total cakewalk for his legions. He saw it as a shortcut to the legacy he was so desperate for.
So this wasn't just another war. It was really a clash of worlds. Kind of like a Roman lion deciding to take a stroll through a desert just filled with Parthian scorpions. The result, looking back, was almost inevitable. Now, if you just looked at the numbers on paper, you think this was a done deal. The Romans should have absolutely dominated. I mean, they had a 4-to-1 advantage in men. But, as we know, numbers can be really deceiving. See, the Romans were basically a wall of heavy infantry. They were built for these grinding, face-to-face battles. The Parthians, though, under their genius general Surena, they were something else entirely. An all-cavalry force. Think of them as a whirlwind of horse archers mixed with these terrifying, heavily armored lancers called Cataphracts.
And this right here shows the tactical nightmare perfectly. The Romans did what they did best. They formed a defensive hollow square. It's basically a slow-moving fortress of shields and spears. It's great for stopping a direct charge, but out in the wide-open desert, it was a sitting duck for the Parthians, who could just ride circles around them, peppering them with arrows from every angle without any real risk.
Crassus's first epic blunder was choosing the battlefield. His ally, the king of Armenia, literally begged him to take a safer route through the mountains where the Parthian cavalry would be basically useless. But Crassus, impatient and hungry for a quick victory, just ignored him. He marched his legions straight into the flat, open desert, which was, for all intents and purposes, a perfect killing field for his enemy. So the stage was set for an absolute slaughter. What happened next wasn't really a battle. It was more like the systematic dismantling of a Roman army, all orchestrated by the brilliant and frankly terrifying tactics of the Parthian general, Surena. Surena's plan? Man, it was just a work of art. It was pure psychological and logistical genius. Step 1, terrify the Romans. He brought out thousands of hollow kettle drums and just created this deafening, unnerving sound. Then, his horse archers just swarmed the Roman square, raining down arrows from a distance. They perfected that famous Parthian shot, firing backwards while pretending to retreat. And right when the Romans must have been thinking, okay, they've got to be running out of arrows soon, that's when Surena played his ace. He had a baggage train of 1,000 camels just loaded with more arrows, an almost endless supply. It was only then, once the legions were pinned down, exhausted, and bleeding, that he sent in the heavy hitters, the armored Cataphracts, to charge in and just shatter what was left of their spirit. Crassus, seeing his men just getting cut to pieces, made a desperate emotional move. He ordered his own son, Publius, a talented officer who had just come from serving with Caesar in Gaul, to take the army's best cavalry and a few infantry cohorts and just charge to try and break the encirclement. This was the big turning point of the whole battle.
As soon as Publius charged, the Parthian horse archers immediately turned and acted like they were fleeing. Publius, young and eager for a victory, took the bait. He chased them, leading his men further and further away from the main army's protection. But it was a classic tactic, a fake retreat, and it was a deadly trap. Once they were lured away, that was it. Publius and his men were completely surrounded and just annihilated. And Crassus? Back with the main army, he's waiting, probably hoping for news of his son's glorious victory. Well, he got his answer, but it wasn't the one he wanted. The Parthians rode back towards the Roman lines, but they weren't retreating. They were carrying something. The head of his son, Publius, stuck on the end of a spear. Can you even imagine? For Crassus, for his entire army, in that moment, the will to fight just completely shattered. So the battle was lost, but the horror for the surviving Romans was far, far from over. The aftermath was just a brutal, horrifying testament to the sheer scale of their failure. The numbers are just staggering. Out of the roughly 40,000 soldiers Crassus marched into that desert, 20,000 were killed, just wiped out. And it gets worse. Another 10,000 were captured. This was a profound humiliation for Rome, an empire that prided itself on never, ever surrendering. Their sacred legionary standards, those golden eagles, became Parthian war trophies. And the Parthians? How many men did they lose? Ancient sources just say their losses were minimal. This wasn't a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. What about Crassus himself? Well, he was lured into a fake peace negotiation and then killed. And this is where history kind of blends into legend. The story goes that the Parthians, as a final, brutal mockery of his famous greed, poured molten gold down his throat. A pretty symbolic and gruesome end for the richest man in Rome. But the story doesn't end there. This disaster wasn't just about one man's death or one army getting destroyed. The aftershocks from the Battle of Carrhae would shake the very foundations of Rome and, ultimately, help bring the entire republic to its knees. You see, Crassus wasn't just a third wheel. He was the glue, the political and financial weight that balanced out the massive military egos of Caesar and Pompey. With him gone, that balance was shattered. The two remaining giants were set on a collision course, and there was no stopping it. A massive civil war was practically inevitable. And from the ashes of that war, a dictator rose, and the Roman Republic, as the world knew it, was gone. Forever. The psychological wound of Carrhae was just so deep that decades later, getting those captured legionary eagles back through diplomacy was seen as this huge political victory for Rome's first emperor, Augustus. He actually minted coins to celebrate it. That's how badly this one defeat haunted the Roman mind. So think about that. In the end, this one single campaign, born from one man's personal ambition, didn't just get 30,000 of his own men killed or captured. It lit the fuse on a civil war that completely destroyed the republic he was supposed to be serving. It really makes you stop and think, and it leaves us with a pretty heavy question. What is the real price of ambition?